disconnect the battery first. You want to disconnect the negative terminal. Use a 13mm wrench, loosen up the nut, and wiggle this back and forth and set it aside. This cover is going to come off. You may have two fasteners right there, two bolts, probably a 10mm socket. This vehicle doesn't have those. Pull those out and then raise up on the cover. There's just a rubber grommet that holds that on. Two rubber grommets. There's a couple 10mm bolts right here. Use a 10mm socket, take those out. We want to loosen up the screws on the worm clamp right here. Use an 8mm socket or even a Phillips head screwdriver. Oops, that one. Sometimes those come out like that. Just loosen that up. And then over here as well. And use some hose clamp pliers or just regular pliers. Move this hose clamp. Slide this off. Just twist it back and forth. If you need to, you can use a pick. And we can take this snorkel off. Slide it off over here. And slide it off. We'll take this hose off here, use the hose clamp tool or some pliers, slide that up. You can try to twist this off, or if you need to, use a pick or a screwdriver. Just grab that. Or you can use some hose pliers. Just try to twist this. I'll just get a pick under here, loosen it up. There we go, pull that off. Slide that out of the way. I'm going to take these two lines off. If you want to, block these off because you're going to have some coolant come out of here. I'm just going to use some locking pliers. They do make special pliers for this. Now we're going to take these clamps off and just slide this back. If you have to, move the locking pliers. And same with this one. This one's a little harder to get to. And take these hoses off. Just twist them a little bit. I'm going to take this hose off right here. If there's a clamp, just move it down. Slide that off. Just to get a little room, I'm just going to pop this off right here where the wire is. So we can move this out of the way. Just use a screwdriver. And then there's a retainer right here that's holding this hose on. I want to pop that retainer off. Just get under here with a trim tool. Just try to pry this up. There we go. Oh, some of the plastic's a little brittle, so you might have to replace that. And there's a bracket right here. Just pop the wire conduit off here. Just move that out of the way. There's a connector on the back here. We want to pop that connector off. Push down on the connector, Slide that off. This is just going to slide back here. Just keep that out of the way. Just see what this hose is. Oh, there's another hose here. We want to slide this connector off this bracket. I'm just going to push down and just slide the connector off. Just use a straight blade screwdriver. It slides off and out of the way. And then I'm going to take this bracket off. Use a 10mm socket, take these bolts out. There's a hose that goes right here. It goes over to the brake booster. You can see that. So we're going to disconnect that over here. Use some hose clamp pliers. Move that hose clamp. It's kind of hard to see. Just move those down. So that it doesn't get so confusing with taking all these hoses off, we're just going to take these two hoses off right here. Just use some type of pliers. Slide those off. Same with this. Carefully slide this down. And then we'll leave all these together and then take these two bolts out. Take this one out with a 10mm socket. And use a 12mm socket to take this bolt out. You can just slide this out and put it aside. Disconnect the connector right here. Just push down on the tab and slide it out. And there's a bracket on the side right here. Use a 12mm socket or even a ratchet wrench. Take those two bolts out. There's one here and then one further back. Once you get them loose, they come out pretty easy. I'm going to take this bracket out of the way just so everything clears a little bit easier. Use a 10mm socket, take these two bolts out. And the bracket's attached down below, and we'll just slide it just out of the way. That's good. Now we're going to take the nuts and bolts out for the intake. Use a 10mm socket. There's one in the way back here. And be careful, try not to drop them. There's a couple hidden ones in here, so don't forget those. Where is it? All of them, and grab the intake and just slide it up out of the way. Just so there's more room, I'm going to pull the air box off on the driver's side, disconnect the connector right there, push down on the tab, slide these clips off and slide it out of the way. Now disconnect the connector, push down on the tab, and again there's 3 bolts holding this on. Oops. Use a 10mm socket, take those 3 bolts out. And grab the solenoid and just slide it out. Make sure you have the gasket with you. And take a rag and just wipe it. If there's any gasket material on there, you want to scrape it with a razor blade or a scraper. Make sure it's cleaned up good. Looks good. Take the new solenoid, make sure you have the gasket lined up correctly. Take the bolts, get the bolts started. Just line this up and get all the bolts started first. All right, ready? And torque these bolts to 8 foot-pounds. I'll just go around again, double check. Yep, that's good. Line the connector up, plug it in, and lock it down. When you're doing the driver's side, you do not need to have all the intake off or any of this other stuff. All you need is to take the snorkel and the air box off just to access it. Now reinstall the air box, line the feet up at the bottom, and then lock it down. Plug the connector in for the mass airflow sensor, and if there's a tab, just slide that in position right there. In all the ports for the intake, you could take a blowgun and just make sure nothing fell in there. You can take a look down in there, get any dirt out of there, and then take some brake parts cleaner and a rag and just wipe this down. Make sure it looks nice and smooth. Make sure there's no gasket material on there at all. When you take the intake off, you're going to want to replace these gaskets. You take a small pick, get underneath the gasket, and then put the new gasket in its place. When that's all set, just line this back up the same way it came off. You're going to go over the studs. Just like that. Make sure you didn't crush anything in the back. All right. Now we'll take all the nuts and bolts. Get these all started. Before we tighten those down, make sure you get these started on this side, just so it's lined up in the right position. And we're not going to tighten them down, just put them in loosely. We'll tighten them later. That's good for now. Now snug these down first, working from the center outward. Now we're going to do 2 passes. The first pass, we're going to torque these to 5 foot-pounds, working from the center out. And then go back again, adjust your torque wrench to 21 foot-pounds. And working from the center outwards. Now tighten these down. That's good. Now take the brake booster vacuum hose and slide that over the fitting. Use some hose clamp pliers, put that back. Line this bracket up. Take the 2 bolts, get those started. Tighten this down. Reattach the wires where you can attach them. Reattach this hose on this fitting right here. This one's a little broken. And if there was a clamp, put the clamp back on. Attach these coolant hoses. Then you can take the pliers off and move the clamps. Reconnect the throttle body, lock it in place. In this bracket, slide that in position. Put the 2 screws in. Tighten those down. This hose is going to go over here. Connect that. And slide the clamp down. Any wires that came unattached, resecure those. Looks good. What else? Now reinstall the solenoid in this canister. Put the correct bolts in. Tighten those down. Attach the vacuum hoses. The shorter one's going to go right here. And the longer one's going to go over to the intake. If that went like that, if that went like that. I feel like that was like that. All right. Now reinstall the solenoid in this canister. Put the correct bolts in. Tighten those down. attach the vacuum hoses. The shorter one's going to go right here, and the longer one's going to go over to the intake. Reconnect the connector and lock it down. Install the snorkel. And over the throttle body. Make sure this bolt lines up. There should be two. Put those both in. Tighten the bolt down. And tighten the other one down as well. And tighten these down. Just snug. Same with this one. And just make sure they're snug. That looks good. Take this hose. It's going to slide over here. And move the clamp. Take this top. Slide it over the studs where the grommets lock down, and put those two bolts in, snug them down. Connect the battery. And tighten it down, make sure it's snug.